Hello everyone and welcome back to IMO Reviews. Today we are discussing the new much talked about horror movie, SKINAMARINK. This is an experimental horror film in which two young children have been abandoned by their parents and they are left to fend for themselves at home. But a strange entity seems to be there with them. I was very excited to finally sit down and watch this one. I have seen several other reviews, I've heard a lot of talk about this film, how it's completely exceeded expectations, how it's this new breakout horror movie that's changed the game. I love horror, I love weird, I love innovative, game-changing movies, and from the synopsis that I read out, I did think this sounded potentially interesting. This sounded right up my street. And now that I've seen it, I've got some thoughts. And we'll start with the positives, and the obvious one is that this film is hugely unique and inspiring to see what can be done with so little. I believe this film had a budget of just $15,000, which of course no average person is just going to throw away £15,000, but in a movie making industry, that's pennies. So I give full credit to the movie for exploring other ideas, other avenues, being able to work within the very small confined box that it found itself put in. And it really does fill every inch of that box that it's been stuffed into. It pushes its limits as far as it can. And in the film being hugely experimental and unique, this film definitely is an experience. In fact, I'd say it's more of an experience than it is an actual film. And on some level, that's great. It's both interesting and rare to see a horror movie that is solely focused on its delivery and presentation, rather than the scares and the story. SKINAMARINK very much realises that the scares can come from the delivery and the presentation. That slow winding of a guitar string, that anxiety hanging over you that there is something in that shadowy corner over there, rather than having a creepy lady with long black hair do this to you every 5 minutes. Yeah, jump scares have never really been for me, so on that level I really did appreciate the direction that SKINAMARINK was trying to go in. And it does create this tension and atmosphere really well. Whilst watching the movie, I wasn't scared, I'll be brutally honest, and I will get into that later. But when I went to bed the night after watching and the lights turned out and I had my duvet up to my neck, it was in that moment when you start to look at the dark corner in your bedroom, you see that coat hanging off the back of your door that suddenly looks like a person. That was when SKINAMARINK really excelled for me. That's when my brain immediately transported to the film I just watched and did leave me feeling a little bit creeped out. But because I've got a heart of ice, I managed to sleep perfectly fine, no problem at all. Demons are all good with me. And as I mentioned, that probably is the most powerful and fascinating aspect of this movie. But it doesn't make it a good film though. And that is sadly where we have to dovetail straight into the complaints about SKINAMARINK. You all know me well enough now to know that experimental, weird, challenging, thought-provoking movies are exactly what I love. I don't really care for routine and cliches and we're just doing that old-fashioned character arc once again, but just rehashing it. No, I love movies that kick doors down and just say screw you to the rules and do what they want. Because it's those movies that are more likely going to land on unfounded territory and possibly change the game forever. And I wish I could say all of those factors apply to SKINAMARINK, but they really, really didn't. I struggled like hell to latch onto anything with this movie. The longer it went on and the less that it gave me, the more pretentious and artsy I found it to be, and to a detriment at that. This movie feels like it is so far up its own arsehole, I'm not kidding. Way further than it needs to be. And it does feel unfinished. It feels like the movie is hiding the fact that its ideas are very clearly half-baked, and it's covering that up by just filling its runtime with wasteful shots. And the golden rule in cinema is that you're supposed to use every shot efficiently. You are always supposed to show the audience what they need. Do not waste their time. Do not mislead them. And yeah, I appreciate SKINAMARINK really trying to not pay attention to the rules and do its own thing, but actually SKINAMARINK just managed to prove exactly why these rules are in place in the first place. Showing me an endless amount of wasteful shots was wasteful. There was no undertone or metaphor to pick up from you focusing on the corner of that wall and then focusing on the corner of that wall and then just looking at the back of this armchair. There wasn't any subtext to that. It's just the back of an armchair. Barely having a character to follow or learn about just left me constantly waiting for this story to pick up, only to quickly realise at the halfway point that it ain't gonna. There isn't a story to tell here. Not really. Just don't waste the energy or your brain cells trying to put this narrative together, because there just really isn't one beyond the synopsis that I said at the beginning. And even then, I kind of feel like the synopsis gives you more than what the film actually does. In that synopsis, I feel like I've dressed it up pretty damn well to be bigger than it even is. And I didn't dress it up that big. That's how little story we're working with here. I mean, really, if I wanted to be brutally harsh, the synopsis should say, this is a horribly filmed old-fashioned videotape where very little happens except a lot of dark corners and you can't really hear the audio that well. Oh, and it has a hugely underwhelming ending as well. So, what's the point? What is the reasoning for this film to exist? What's its motive? What's its agenda? What does it want to say? What does it want to achieve? Who is it for? And having seen the film, sadly, I can't answer any of those questions for you. I don't know, is the answer I have to offer. On some level, I actually feel conned and ripped off by the movie because, as I mentioned, it barely felt like a movie at times. More just a hodgepodge pile of random shots in the dark, several of which you actually can't make anything out. And sometimes it often repeats its imagery, which gets really boring really quickly. The development and the pacing of this film is just so bad it's almost non-existent. It doesn't seem to care about the audience watching it. It doesn't seem to care if you're invested or not. It just never picked up its audience from the get-go and just carries on with its weird little journey without you. And actually, by the end of the film, I was quite grateful I wasn't carried along for the ride, because it wasn't a very interesting ride at all. It's way too focused on atmosphere and style, and it completely and utterly forgets to be scary and tell an interesting story or deliver a good message along the way. And I know this is always a strange complaint when I bring this up, but I like to look out for people. I don't ever really see other reviewers mention this warning to people, but if you do suffer with epilepsy, just don't go and see this one. There is an unholy amount of film grain, bouncing lights, shadows, recordings of televisions that are very quick flashing lights, and it's surrounded by dark shadows, so it is sort of quite protruding. I don't suffer with epilepsy, and I found myself getting a headache in some spots, so if you do suffer with it, I'm pretty much banking on it that you're not going to enjoy this experience. And I did mention it earlier, but I just wasn't scared by this film at all. Not even for a bit. For all its atmosphere and tone, I felt nothing. If anything, and this does say a lot about me as a person, but if anything, I found myself more relaxed. My heartbeat actually slowed down rather than sped up. Because it's so meandering and it's just so slow itself, there really wasn't anything to be that intensely concerned about. Maybe a small scene in the bedroom that I did think was quite well done, but even then I do have issues with that scene. But yeah, that scene was probably the scariest part of the film, and it wasn't scary. And I think what happened was that I myself caught on that this movie wasn't going to deliver anything quite early on, so any anxiety and worry I had very quickly left my brain. And then it just became about me watching these scary scenes and going, it's going to cut to black. They're not going to have a jump scare or anything. This is all going to be a dick tease. Oh, yeah, and I'm right. They've changed the camera. They did a little and now it's gone. Cool. Okay. Still waiting for this movie to give me anything. And this is a complaint. I'm genuinely curious if other people also struggled with this. Maybe I need my ears cleaning out. I thought the audio in this was just atrociously bad. I understand that it's meant to be a home video, but my god, I can't actually hear a word that's being said. Sometimes it has subtitles, sometimes it doesn't. It's like the film doesn't know what it's doing half the time. This is the smallest, tiniest spoiler detail to a point that it's barely even a spoiler because I'm not going to give you any context as to what I'm talking about. There is a scene where this quote-unquote entity speaks to one of the children, but all I heard was him going, I'm sorry, what? One more time for me, please. Just one more time. Listen, Mr. Demon, I'm more than happy to compromise. I don't want to go to hell. I'm happy to work with you. But we clearly need to work on our communication skills here. That would have been me in that scenario. I could not operate with this demon. We would not get on. We would not make a good team. And it certainly doesn't make for an interesting or compelling movie villain because I don't know what he wants. I don't know what he's saying. I really don't understand the hype for this movie. I really don't. It tries to reinvent the wheel, by creating a broken wheel that bumps and grinds and constantly falls off. I'm not really sure what's being commended and praised here beyond the fact that they tried something new. It may have tried, but it failed miserably if you ask me. So I'm going to give SKINAMARINK a 3 out of 10. I am really disappointed by this film. I was excited for it. The hype and the reviews really built it up. And to be brutally honest, it's a total waste of time. And in fact, I'd even go as far as betting that this huge hype it's receiving is going to be its downfall. It's not interested in characters, narrative, you yourself, the audience. The only thing this film wants to do is shove its head up its own arsehole while you bear witness to it happening. Weird, repetitive, atmospheric imagery of doorways and Twilight Zone sound effects. It doesn't make for a fun, interesting film. It's not scary. It's actually kind of annoying the longer it goes on, and even a little bit headache-inducing, in fact. I am glad it exists. I am even glad I watched it. It is definitely original, it is definitely experimental, and it is eye-opening to its usual traditions and formats of storytelling. But it's really poorly executed, and it delivers a hugely undercooked idea. Thank you for watching this review. Please be sure to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. And please do hit the comment section as well. Have you seen SKINAMARINK? What did you think about it? Have I got it completely wrong? Is it one of your favourite horror movies? Let me know in the comment section below. And of course, if you haven't had enough of this crazy fella, you can always click on these suggested videos here and get yourself lost in an IMO wormhole. But if not, take care, and I look forward to seeing you on the next review.